Hi everyone, in this video we are going to discuss the negative aspects of petroleum. And so just like we saw with coal, there are two different negative pieces of using petroleum as a source of energy. So it's how you find that fossil fuel, so how do we actually obtain that petroleum, and then what happens when we burn it. So let's start off by looking at the negative aspects from finding the petroleum or finding the oil. First things first, right now our supply does not equal our demand. And so what I want to do is put some numbers on this just to give you a better grasp of this. So let's compare the 1950s to now, so 2015, and we're going to look at two different categories. We're either going to look at how much oil was found per year in unit of barrels versus how much was consumed. So in 1950, we actually found around, and again, this is on average, around 30 billion barrels of oil every single year. So that's awesome. That's a lot of oil that we found. Whereas we were consuming, on average, around 4 billion barrels. Okay. Fast forward to now in 2015, we are now finding per year around 4 billion barrels, where we're consuming 33.7 billion barrels, and that number is from 2014, from last year's report. So we are consuming 33.7 billion of barrels. Luckily, this number is going to change for our 2016 report, because in April of 2015, Britain found 100 billion barrels of oil. It was located next to their airport. They just stumbled upon it in 100 billion barrels. So good job, Britain. We're super grateful for that. All right, number two, what else is bad about petroleum? Well, it's hard to drill. It's not as easy as it seems, and there are certain areas that are more difficult to access the oil than others. Specifically, I'm talking about our oil reservoirs in Utah. We also have some in Wyoming, and we have some in Colorado. So now, just for the U.S., we are saying that we have about 3 trillion barrels of oil located in Utah, Wyoming, and Colorado that we're not even going to touch. We're going to leave it there. We're going to wait till we are so desperate that we need the oil that we're going to find some way to dig down deep in there and pull and extract that oil from the ground. But it is hard to obtain. In certain areas, it's easier in others. All right, so now, otherwise, our petroleum can be located hundreds of feet below seawater. And so this is fine if you're able to drill down there, do deep sea drilling, get the oil out, no problems, no leaks, nothing, it's fine. Unless it's not. And when it's not, it is really, really bad. And I'm going to specifically reference the BP oil spill that happened in April of 2010. So what happened is they drilled down and they eventually had a leak. They basically cracked a cap, is the best way you could describe it. And so from April to July, they were having anywhere between 35,000 to 60,000 barrels of oil lost per day, just lost, going straight into the ocean that we weren't grabbing. So by July, they were finally able to get a cap that was tight enough, and they were able to screw into that leak essentially and stop it from leaking. But in that time span, so April to July, they estimate they lost 4.9 million gallons, so not barrels, but gallons of oil. 4.9 million gallons of oil just lost into the ocean. Let me show you what happens when that, okay. These are my favorite penguins in the entire world. They are called Rockhopper Penguins, and they are completely covered with oil. So I don't want to go on a big long thing and tell you why this is terrible, but I think we've proven our point here right here. So these gorgeous, awesome penguins are completely coated in oil, and it makes me so sad. And so for those of you who aren't up to date on your penguin status, this is what a gorgeous rockhopper is supposed to look like. They are my favorite penguins in the entire world, so it absolutely kills me to see this picture. In fact, I don't even want to look at it. I don't want to look at it. All right, so let's look at our very last piece here. So for number 4, our worst aspect of this, same thing as coal, is when we burn petroleum, we are releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, and that is a very, very bad greenhouse gas. We know that carbon dioxide absorbs that infrared radiation, which then warms up our planet, and we end up having the enhanced greenhouse effect, or global warming. So it's a big, big problem. So I think I've illustrated here why we have some negative aspects about petroleum. It's not as bad as coal, in my personal opinion, unless you have big leaks in the seawater, then it's an absolute disaster. But let's review one question here and see if we can get everything in relation to each other in terms of wood, coal, and petroleum. So, if we burned 1 gram of wood, coal, and petroleum, now this is all separately, okay, so I probably should say or individually, which resource or which well, we'll say resource, would release the most energy. And so specifically, how could we then convert it to electrical energy? So out of these three, which source of fuel do you want to use? Go. Did you get an answer? Hopefully you did. We've talked about this a couple different times, but let's just make sure we're all on the same page for the very last time. Wood, about 10 kilojoules per every gram burned. Coal, about 30 kilojoules of heat evolved for every 1 kilogram or 1 gram burned. And then for petroleum, it's all the way up to 48 kilojoules of energy per every gram burned. Petroleum is definitely our best source of energy. If we are just looking at per substance, per 1 gram, we definitely get the most heat evolved from the combustion of petroleum. Take care of yourselves, have a great week, and drink water.